Hey, what's up guys, it's Moonfyye here, and today I'll be diving into my final review for Modern Warfare 3. This is going to be a bittersweet farewell to Modern Warfare 3 as we explore the exciting highs, the frustrating lows, and everything in between that shaped our experience playing Modern Warfare 3. So let's take a stroll down memory lane and reflect on everything that made Modern Warfare 3 stand out. And as a heads up, I'm a very casual gamer, and most things that may have bothered the more hardcore audience didn't affect me as much or at all. Additionally, this is the first time I've ever made a video like this, so please keep in mind that 1. Everything mentioned in this video is just my opinion, and 2. This video is intended to create an open discussion about the life cycle of Modern Warfare 3, and I strongly encourage you to share your opinions in the comments down below of whether you agree or disagree with what I'm saying, as well as commenting on any other topics related to Modern Warfare 3 that I did not touch base on. With that in mind, let's dive into the campaign of Modern Warfare 3. It's safe to say we all experienced a whirlwind of emotions, whether that was happiness, frustration, and even sadness. As a casual player, I genuinely enjoyed many aspects of the campaign, though there were moments that left me scratching my head. I want to emphasize that I did enjoy the Modern Warfare 3 campaign overall. Despite its short length, I believe Sledgehammer Games did an impressive job, especially considering it had been rumored that they only had about 60 months to create Modern Warfare 3, a surprisingly short time frame. And to put that into perspective, I was just starting YouTube. This was Smite era Moonfyye we're talking about. With that said though, I did have some reservations, particularly regarding the open world combat missions, which didn't resonate with me as much as I would have hoped it would have. More often than not, the open world combat felt a bit empty and slow, unfortunately not living up to the standards I expect from a Call of Duty campaign. One aspect that bothered me was the stealth missions. It was too easy to break stealth, which led to a dozen enemies suddenly aggroing onto you. Additionally, I found it disappointing that there were no intel drops to collect. I understand that this may seem like a niche concern, but there were laptops scattered throughout the campaign that could have easily served as intel drops for players to seek out. While I appreciate the attempt to spice things up, the open world aspect of Modern Warfare 3 felt lackluster and aimless at times. Though open world elements can be fun in other games, I don't think it was executed as well as it could have been in Modern Warfare 3. I know I started off by discussing the campaign in a negative light, but as I mentioned earlier, I genuinely enjoyed my overall experience. I wanted to clarify that it wouldn't be fair to give a final review of Modern Warfare 3 without acknowledging the aspects that we may not fully agree with. So that being said, here's everything that I loved about the campaign. First thing I want to mention was just how beautiful the environments and scenes were. There were so many beautiful locations in this campaign that were truly breathtaking. The attention to detail was not overlooked when it came to all the environments, between the dynamic lighting throughout the different missions to the immersive sounds that made you feel like you're a part of the action. I really appreciate the amount of attention to detail that went into the overall campaign. On a positive note, the character development was quite interesting, and as we know, our beloved character Soap McTavish was written off in Modern Warfare 3, and while those of us who played the original Modern Warfare 3 from 2011 knew what to expect, his death in both games was genuinely heartbreaking. Not to mention the scene on the cliff with Captain Price, Gaz, and Ghost with Soap's ashes really just tore my heart into a million pieces, because at this moment it was confirmed that Soap's character truly was written off and will not be rewritten into the story like Graves. There are definitely more positives about the campaign that I'd love to dive into, but honestly I'd end up talking about it much longer than I planned to. So with that being said, let's talk about the multiplayer. Modern Warfare 3 has had some of the best post-launch support I've seen in a Call of Duty game in quite some time. Not only has there been an impressive amount of content added after the launch, but the quality of the updates continued to amaze me with each new season. As we know, Modern Warfare 3 is a direct follow-up to Modern Warfare 2, with Sledgehammer Games building on the foundation laid by Infinity Ward. They improved and in some cases fixed issues that gave Modern Warfare 2 a negative reputation, like the need to earn perks throughout a match, which felt unnecessary. In my opinion, Sledgehammer Games did an excellent job listening to feedback and applying it to Modern Warfare 3 to make the game an overall better experience for the players. And as a quick side note, this video isn't meant to criticize or hate on Modern Warfare 2. If you weren't aware, I personally like Modern Warfare 2, especially since it's the first Call of Duty game I started uploading to YouTube, so for that reason alone it has a special place in my heart. Now getting back on track, I want to discuss the aftermarket part system that was introduced in Modern Warfare 3. This feature has quickly become one of my favorite aspects of the game. Initially, I didn't pay much attention to the aftermarket part system since I was so heavily focused on unlocking Interstellar Camo, but I gradually warmed up to it as the game progressed, and for those unfamiliar, the aftermarket part system allows players to complete weekly challenges, to unlock blueprints, attachments, or even weapon conversion kits. Once the season wraps up and you've completed all your weekly challenges, you end up earning a fun camo to showcase all your hard work. Another great thing about the aftermarket part system is you could revisit and complete previous challenges at any given point during the season. This was fantastic because if you missed a week of COD, you could still catch up on challenges. Overall, the system highlights Sledgehammer's creativity and innovative thinking. With the aftermarket part system, we saw some incredible transformations, like turning an LMG into a sniper rifle and the ability to dual wield shotguns, along with the mini flamethrower, just to mention a few. The possibilities with the aftermarket parts were truly endless. The only downside to the aftermarket part system, as far as I know, is we won't see this feature return in Black Ops 6. My assumption is that they were unsure how gamers would react to this system and chose not to include it. Additionally, since Black Ops 6 has been in development for far longer than Modern Warfare 3, it is possible they didn't consider adding something like the aftermarket part system to Black Ops 6. Next up, I want to talk about the Mastery Camo grind in Modern Warfare 3. This year's camo grind has been both enjoyable and frustrating at times. Before I get into what made it frustrating, I do have to highlight a significant change that improved the grind. We no longer had to go for long shots on every single weapon to unlock Forge Camo. This was a refreshing change of pace because I'm spacing out if I have to go for long shots on any weapon. On top of that, many of the challenges were new and exciting, making the grind even more enjoyable. Another fantastic quality of life for the Mastery Camo grind was the ability to track our camo challenges. Although this feature wasn't available at the start of Modern Warfare 3 and was introduced in a later update, it significantly enhances the experience. I truly appreciate being able to monitor my progression rather than guesstimating where I am in my camo grind. Now let's discuss what made the Mastery Camo grind frustrating. Some of the camo challenges were downright miserable, like the one that required you to stun enemies before eliminating them. Whenever I had to complete that challenge, I knew I had to board the struggle bus. Additionally, some challenges didn't track properly. An example of this is with the RGL, where you had to destroy enemy equipment but it wouldn't register. It wasn't until a later update that this issue was fixed. And to top it off, when I finally completed my Interstellar camo grind, the pop-up notification that shows Interstellar unlocked never appeared for me, which was truly disheartening, especially after spending so much time to unlock it. I know that last issue might just be specific to me, but it's frustrating to know that you can complete all the challenges to unlock Interstellar and still be gypped on the most rewarding moment of the camo grind. Now let's talk about the Armory unlock system. This system felt rather unnecessary to me as it prolonged how much time you need to spend in order to unlock a singular piece of equipment, perk, or even weapon. That said, you had to reach level 25 or so before you could even gain access to the Armory unlock system. The reason why this system bothers me is because once you've gained access to the Armory, you had to queue up what you want to unlock from it. Otherwise, the system would pick something random for you to unlock, and on top of that, you are only able to queue up to 3 items at a time to unlock from the Armory. Once everything is queued up and ready to go, you have to complete a set of daily challenges or even win matches to make progression on the items you want to unlock. So for an arbitrary example of this, if you want to unlock the High Alert perk, you would have to complete 8 challenges or wins to even gain access to it. This not only prolonged how long it took to earn certain items, but also created a giant time sink for players. The system is quite frankly inferior to the system we've all become accustomed to, which is the traditional leveling up system. To make this clear, the reason why something like this is a bad system is because you could be at level 60 but still not have everything unlocked. But if we were looking at the traditional unlock system, by the time you are max ranked, you'll have everything available to you. This is why I am not a fan of the Armory system in Modern Warfare 3, and I would heavily prefer the system to not return moving forward. I do want to apologize if that does come across as harsh. Obviously, there's no maliciousness behind this video. I just want to express my honest opinion without sugarcoating it. Aside from that, I'd like to talk about the prestige camos that were added into the game. As we know, prestige camos are a wonderful way of expressing our love and dedication to Modern Warfare 3. It also gives us gloating rights, as you have to grind for thousands upon thousands of XP to even gain access to them in the first place. With the addition of prestige camos, it gave players an opportunity to continue grinding and working towards a whole new set of camos after completing either their Mastery camo grind or even Zombies camo grind. And technically, you didn't even have to start on either one of these camo grinds, you can just start on the prestige camo grind right away. Anyways, the whole point of this was to create new challenges for players to obtain camos that most players would not typically have. And I think it's safe to say the addition of prestige camos overall was a nice touch. However, one thing I ended up learning about myself when it comes to prestige camos is I strongly dislike having to go for camos that are solely based upon obtaining a certain amount of XP. While I truly do love the look of each prestige camo that was added into Modern Warfare 3, I simply could not get behind mindlessly grinding for XP for a singular weapon in hopes of obtaining a prestige camo. For that, I give up major props to whoever dedicated a good chunk of time to unlock these camos, as I simply couldn't be bothered to get anything past one trick. Aside from that, these camos are aesthetically pleasing to look at, and while I do envy those who have Constellation's End, I know that they deserve it a lot more than I do, as they were simply more committed to the grind than I was. Speaking of endless XP grinding, I had the same issue when it came to a lot of the events. Most of the events in Modern Warfare 3 was centered around XP grinding, which was ultimately a bit of a letdown for me. Personally, I prefer completing specific tasks and challenges rather than repeatedly grinding for XP. That way, whatever the reward is from the event feels more rewarding and worthwhile. Anyways, I guess it goes without saying, but I ended up skipping a lot of the events that happened this year, unfortunately. Hopefully in Black Ops 6, the events can cater towards both XP grinders and those of us who prefer doing task events. Aside from that, the last thing I want to talk about for multiplayer is the post-launch support, specifically the addition of new game modes and maps. As I mentioned earlier, Modern Warfare 3's multiplayer post-launch content has been outstanding. We've seen some incredibly creative and unique game modes introduced, and my personal favorite game mode has to be Mutation. The ability to transform into zombies with unique skins and abilities was such an exciting part of the multiplayer experience for me. Other game modes like Get High, Arcade, and Horde Point were also fantastic. This year's multiplayer has truly been packed with a variety of experiences, both thrilling and exciting, and if I'm being honest here, Modern Warfare 3's multiplayer experience this year has easily been one of my favorite multiplayer experiences as of late. The new and refreshing game modes have kept things engaging and even fun, even when other aspects of the game missed the mark for me. On top of that, the map variety that we got this year was insane, and I'm not talking about the many shipment variants that got pooped out at the end of the game. I'm talking about roughly 17 brand new maps that were added into the game. This doesn't include the reskins or war maps. This also doesn't include the remastered maps from Modern Warfare 2 2009. The map pool variety that was added into Modern Warfare 3 was plenty, and a lot of the maps played out wonderfully too. I really aim to play more map varieties this year versus last year, where I primarily stuck with shipment. And on top of that, most maps had a pretty great map flow as well. However, the only gripe I have in multiplayer maps were sometimes the spawns could be a major hit or miss, which could become pretty frustrating at times. As we know, spawns can make it or break it for the multiplayer experience, and in Modern Warfare 3, they were sometimes inconsistent. While most of the multiplayer maps played out pretty well and offered great spawn locations, there were a few maps like Ghost Mint where you would spawn in unpredictable locations, often in front of the enemies who were already watching your spawn. This type of inconsistency with spawns was annoying to deal with at times. Another issue I noticed about the spawns while playing Hardpoint was how frequently you would spawn the opposite side of the map and away from the objective. This was especially irritating in matches when the score was neck and neck and the enemies were already controlling the point. Whether it was due to enemy placement or just bad luck, it felt like the spawns didn't prioritize proximity to hardpoint. This ultimately made it difficult to even get near the objective, because in some cases, you'd end up having to spend a whole minute running to the objective only to die immediately because the enemies had the objective locked down. Because of this, it did not allow for any counterplay, and you'd have to pull a miracle if you really want to win. Going forward, I'm hoping for improved spawns, which in return will create more flow and create a more balanced gameplay experience. Regardless of that, the map pool we got this year truly has been remarkable, and especially most recently with Season 6, we got some very creepy and horror-esque maps that felt very fitting for the haunting event, and this is just the most recent example of something like this. I say this very loosely, by the way. With each new season of Modern Warfare 3, there usually was some type of theme, but with each new season, we got to see some really unique and fun reimagined versions of existing maps. These reimagined maps gave existing maps a breath of fresh air, and at times could alter how the map even played out. That said, as disgusting as it is, Mad Cow is by far my favorite reimagined map, as it adds a unique water element to a map that doesn't have it prior. With that said, Modern Warfare 3's multiplayer has truly been an incredible experience, from innovative game modes like Mutation to the expansive map pool. And while I do have some frustration with the inconsistent spawn mechanics, the overall map pool, seasonal themes, and reimagined versions of classic maps have kept the game engaging and genuinely fun. I'm hoping for future COD games to really fine-tune the spawn mechanics moving forward, that way everything can be more cohesive and create an even better multiplayer experience. Anywho, the last two topics I want to touch base on are the new Modern Warfare Zombies mode and Warzone. For full transparency, neither of these modes truly captured my attention for prolonged periods of time. Occasionally, I would hop on Warzone and Zombies, but ultimately, I just didn't find either of these modes to be interesting, and also, it is worth noting that I have never been super invested into Warzone, and ideally, I would like to change that. However, last year, I found myself playing a lot more Warzone than I did this year with Modern Warfare 3. With that in mind, I've only played Warzone a handful of times this year, which was at the start of the year and again recently to check out the Purgatory game mode. I would have loved to play more Warzone this year, but I found it difficult to keep hopping on Warzone to check if certain game modes like Plunder were available for the week, as this mode was treated like an LTM. And for a casual player like myself, Plunder was my go-to game mode for the last year, and I really couldn't be bothered to keep checking the weekly updates to see if my favorite game mode was back for the week. With that said, Warzone ended up taking a major backseat for me this year. As for Zombies, despite wanting to unlock Borealis Camo and even attempting to unlock it multiple times, I just couldn't find the motivation to grind for it. I felt like I had more issues with the Zombies game mode because I did play it significantly more than Warzone. So that being said, I will have more criticism and points to make of why I ultimately felt like Warzone and Modern Warfare Zombies missed the mark. I remember seeing on Twitter at the launch of Modern Warfare 3 how the former director of Zombies wanted to initially add zombies into Infinite Warfare, but at the time was told that Zombies does not belong in Modern Warfare. However, roughly 8 years later, we now have a Zombies game mode in Modern Warfare 3. And also, I would love to hear your opinions on Zombies before before I dive into mine, so make sure to comment your thoughts about the game mode and let me know what you thought about it. Anyways, back to my point. Modern Warfare 3 Zombies was marketed as a zombies game mode that was similar to Outbreak. However, to me this felt like a bare bones version of Outbreak with a twist. While I appreciate the attempt to add zombies into Modern Warfare 3, it simply missed the mark. More often than not, I found myself spacing out, not realizing I had just spent the last 45 minutes playing a zombies match. I believe this is due to the lack of action, and it is absent of any real threat looming around every single corner waiting for your demise. This ultimately made the MWZ experience feel too tame, and the thrill and intensity that you expect from zombies simply wasn't there. Instead, it felt like the game was missing that scare and intensity factor that we've all come to know when it comes to zombies, making this game mode feel a bit too relaxed and aimless. The only way you could engage in a more intense zombies match was by heading into tier 3 or attempting to do the Dark Aether Rift as far as I'm aware. You also had to grind for higher tier loot prior to entering these areas, and honestly, I just didn't want to go through the hoops and hurdles to do that. The amount of steps needed to prepare for certain zones or activities within zombies became redundant and tedious. What made this process worse and even more of a turnoff for me was how often I felt like I was crashing within matches. This caused me to lose the loot that I worked hard for, and there was no way of recovering it if you didn't have the Tombstone perk active prior to the crash. Even so, the crashes happened so unpredictably, there was no way you could possibly prepare for something like that. Something else that I didn't like about Modern Warfare Zombies was the fact that solo players who didn't use squad fill seemed to have received a harsher penalty for dying in a match versus those who were squatted up. And if you went down and you weren't carrying a self-revive, you would have to hope that someone in the match would revive you. You could obviously go into text chat and voice comms and ask for help, hoping someone would come to your rescue, but that didn't always pan out, I imagine. Thankfully, I never ran into this issue. More or less, I actually ran into other solo players that were knocked down and needed that extra helping hand, which I was more than happy to go help them unless they were in tier 3. If they were in tier 3, well, there's really not much I can do. Alrighty, well, I was kind of going off topic there, but to get things back on track, I want to mention my frustrations with the contract system for zombies. When it comes to completing contracts, anyone in the match can help you complete them. In theory, the idea of having players help each other with their contracts sounds incredibly helpful. However, in some scenarios, it can be quite the opposite. So you could really feel the downside of this when trying to complete a camo challenge in zombies. For example, if you took a bounty contract, another player could eliminate your target before you had the chance to. At first, this sounds helpful, but quickly you'll realize it's annoying to deal with, especially if you were to complete camo challenges. I had this issue when I was trying to complete a challenge for eliminating 5 mimics for a camo, and after obtaining a Mangler bounty for the millionth time, seeing a bounty contract pop up with a mimic made me happy. However, that happiness was short-lived. Another player had already terminated the mimic before I could, causing me to lose out on my camo progression. And also, I am aware that you can find mimics outside of bounty contracts. However, I did prefer eliminating the mimics through bounty contracts, as if you were to look for them in tier 2, it can become overwhelming pretty quickly. Anyways, one potential solution would be to introduce an option for contracts to allow players to choose whether or not they want other players to help with the contract, or restrict it to just themselves and their squad. This way, players could have more control over how they want to play out that match of zombies, and ultimately avoid the frustration of losing out on camo progress or whatever else they may want to accomplish during that match. Having this as an option is a substantial change that would enhance the gameplay and benefit everyone in the long run. Also, implementing a change like this would encourage your squad to work together as well. Despite all the things I did not enjoy about zombies, I want to take a moment to highlight just how kind and helpful the zombies and Warzone community can be. I'm truly thankful for the zombie players who have gone out of their way to drop extra resources at the end of the match, helping newer players improve their inventory and making the grind easier for them, and the Warzone players that have actively went out of their way to help me finish up the Purgatory event by allowing me to squish them with the Terror Balls. It's players like this that remind me just how wonderful the COD community is. Not to mention all the goofy and fun moments we got to experience in multiplayer this year. There's no doubt in my mind that Sledgehammer Games, along with the other supporting dev teams, made Modern Warfare 3 one of the best Call of Duty games in recent years. From introducing brand new game modes to adding incredible map variety and the consistent flow of updates, Modern Warfare 3 has truly raised the bar. And despite having some questionable moments here and there, Modern Warfare 3 ultimately created a multiplayer experience that felt expansive, engaging, and full of life. And finally, to wrap things up, Modern Warfare 3 has been a mixed bag for me, but in the best way possible. Despite my frustration with certain aspects like the Armory unlock system and zombies, the game still provided meaningful content over the year, which in turn created an incredible multiplayer experience. And as someone that mainly plays multiplayer, I can say without a doubt this year's multiplayer experience has been like none other. I'm looking forward to seeing the new game Sledgehammer Games makes as the leading development team in the future, as I believe that whatever they work on next will continue to grasp my excitement. And with all that said, this concludes my final review of Modern Warfare 3. It's been a blast revisiting everything this game had to offer. Obviously, I had my frustrations with a few aspects of the game, but all in all, Modern Warfare 3 has been a genuinely great experience. With that said though, let's all get together and say in unison, farewell Modern Warfare 3. And with that, I am going to go ahead and end my video here. Thank you so much for listening to my final review of Modern Warfare 3. With that said, let me know what you guys thought about Modern Warfare 3, what ended up being your favorite moments, as well as what did you dislike about the game. And also, if I missed out on anything you were hoping to hear about, feel free to let me know in the comments as well. Anyways, with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up here. So with that being said, I hope you guys have a fantastic day, night, or evening. Take it easy and peace. Bye!